Hello and welcome back, adventurers. Sit back, get comfy, and let us finish our stay at Nova Vaasa with a description of its cities. Arboris townsfolk refer to it as the far corner of the world, a statement not made without a certain element of pride. The origins of that description are not hard to discern. Arbora is the southernmost settlement of note in the core and the most physically isolated as well. Not only do the mists surround Arbora and nearby lands on three sides, but it is distant from most large population centers. Because of this relative isolations, Arborans have developed a very independent, self-sufficient attitude and prefer to make their own way as much as possible. Physical isolation has resulted in political isolation as well. Prince Othmar Bolshenik, like many princes before him, cares nothing for the region so long as its taxes arrive. Thus, the Arborans have felt relatively little of the burden of centralized authority since 728 Varovian calendar, the last year Chekhov sat at the throne. The current Duke Chekhov dutifully collects Othmar's taxes and supports his decrees, but exercises little of his own initiative. A feeling of danger simmers in all of Nova Vaasan cities, thanks to the widespread crime and general discontent, but Bhargavita has an extra element of chaos added to the already explosive mix. The Riftovs and the Vistins have long vied for the influence over the city, and the struggle for power and status has boiled over into the streets. Of course, one rarely sees the aristocrats themselves suffering for it. Instead, gangs of thugs, hired by one of the noble families, harass and assault innocent commoners or merchants, whose only fault is that they in some way represent the interests of the rival family. Bhargavita is an important way station in the trade between Kantora and the west, and as a result is the most cosmopolitan of Nova Vaasan cities. Though many come to Bhargavita from other lands to trade, few end up deciding to stay. Bhargavita is as dismal as the rest of the Nova Vaasan cities, and it makes a far better place to visit than to lay roots. Places of interest in Bhargavita include the Crimson Citadel of Fane, a walled religious community on the northern edge of the city and the seat of Pave Lord Ragnar. The Travelers' Market, Bhargavita's bustling commercial center in the western part of the city, and the Ansgar Museum, the former home of the ancient poet converted into a shrine to his life and work. The Avena district in northern western Bhargavita is probably best avoided, despite its popularity. It is the site of the greatest horse races in Nova Vaasa, but the crime there is rampant. Kantora strikes visitors as either an awe-inspiring example of urban splendor or a horrific morass of urban decay. Or perhaps both at once. The city changes dramatically as one passes from the heavily patrolled, meticulously kept aristocratic and government districts into the boroughs of the paupers and tradesmen. Running east-west through the middle of Kantora is the High Road, dividing the city into two. At the center of the High Road and Kantora is the Prince's Palace, the ceremonial seat of Nova Vaasan's government. It is readily apparent that the palace was constructed with grandeur and opulence in mind, rather than practicality. The palace is a breathtaking sight, tall, proud and sprawling, but its fortifications are woeful. The outer wall is thin and short, the gates too wide, and the tower was placed cosmetically rather than strategically. Were Nova Vaasa invaded, the Prince's Palace would surely be abandoned as indefensible. The palace may be the physical center of Kantora, but Horse District is its true heart. Covering the southwestern quarter of the city, the Horse District is dominated by the Great Corral, a wide, open-air market where horse ranchers and trainers display their wares. Here and here alone, the Vistani are kings, proudly displaying their magnificent and expertly trained steeds to a throng of clamoring merchants and traders. In the north is the River Quarter, another bustling trade district, but with a much less savory reputation. The Merchants' Quarter in the southeast is less prosperous than its name would suggest. It is dominated by struggling shops and unemployed laborers, and beggars line every street. On the eastern edge of the city is the Mausoleum of the Elect, a walled tomb where those princes who have died while in office are interred. The Church of the Lawgiver holds that princes who die or are killed during their terms are chosen by the lawgiver, elected to reign beside him in the Iron Paradise, and those so blessed are laid to the rest in the Mausoleum, a high honor. Nova Vaasan's claim that Agurtus was once a city nearly as large as Bhargavita and Liara, and that it was the greatest port of the old Vaasan Empire. Tragically, the judgment lay waste to the city in a manner that is not entirely clear. Some say that large part of Agurtus simply disappeared when the mist rose, just as the sea the Agurtusans once sailed vanished. Others say that the judgment physically shook the city, causing buildings to collapse and crush people beneath them. Agertis was further diminished by a mass exodus, as peasants fled the looming curtains of the mists. The rapid population decline has produced some positive results on the village. Though its structures are as densely placed as those of Nova Vaasan's settlement, the population density is much lower, and thus Agertis is actually a relatively clean, unblighted town. With the appearance of the Nocturnal Sea, though, there has been a flood of immigration, as Nova Vaasans seek to take advantage of this new source of opportunity. In the recent past, Agertis was little more than an appendage of Cantora, sending most of its resources west to satisfy the needs of the bloated city. The situation has begun to reverse, as huge quantities of hemp, flax and imported timber are sent to Agertis to aid in the growth of the Nova Vaasan navy and satisfy the needs of the maritime traders. The increased importance of the town has given Agertians an inflated sense of pride, and they tend to be quite condescending towards visitors and immigrants. Other than the aforementioned beaches, few destinations are of particular interest in Agertis. The only building of intellectual importance was the Clinic of the Mentally Distressed, which was founded by the famous Dr. Gregorian Ilhausen. The clinic served as a hospital and sanitarium for the mentally ill and was one of the most celebrated of those institutions in the Corps. Strangely, the inhabitants of the clinic, both patients and physicians, disappeared without explanation in 749, leaving the clinic abandoned. Liara could almost be counted as two cities, so dramatically does it change as the day fades into night. During daytime hours, Liara is the safest and calmest of Nova Vaasan cities, no doubt thanks to the intervention of Sir Tristan Highguard. For Tristan's actions, the Liara City Watch has been well trained, well equipped, and as cleansed of corruption as could reasonably be expected. Thanks to their dutiful patrolling and integrity, the incidence of open crime on the streets of Liara is significantly lower than that of Bhargavita during the day. After dark, the mood of the city changes. For decades, the Liarians have been living in anxious fear of the signature killer that stalks their nighttime streets. In defiance of that fear, many Liarians have become aggressively exuberant, almost manic in their pursuits of the night illicit diversions. The fear still crouches within them, though, and can be heard and the hard edge of their laughter and seen in the eyes that stay cold while their faces leer. Inevitably, the fear breaks free in some of them, in a fury of anger and violence. The powerful Liarian underworld, controlled by the mysterious Malkin, adds kindling to the fire. It is perhaps fitting that each of Liara's two most significant structures embodies one side of this dichotomy. The Passa Slot, a strong, squat fortress of stone, is the barracks and training grounds of the City Watch, complete with an armory and stable. By day, it rings with the sound of wood and steel as those watchmen not on patrol run through practice drills. By night, it is much quieter, though it never sleeps entirely. Watchmen walk the walls at all hours, hoping that all those who left on patrol at sunset will return at sunrise. The dark twin of the Passa Slot is the Staggering Stallion, the center of the nighttime activity in Liara. A large brick building with a deceptively plain exterior, the Staggering Stallion offers its patrons the opportunity to quench thirsts of all kinds. Other than the obligatory spirits, most of which are brought in from Borovia or Borka, the Staggering Stallion provides opiates, prostitutes, gambling, and beast betting. None of these distasteful activities is actually illegal in Nova Vaasa, but the delights offered by the Staggering Stallion do much to increase the violence and danger of Liara. Thank you so much for your time, patient listeners. Nova Vaasa is a land of contrasts, tiresome but safe during the day, full of pleasures and danger during the night. So if you wish to make your way there, be careful while crossing the mists.